Live from London, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden with your top stories. When a 2,000% gain just isn't enough. Tech stocks lead markets lower after Samsung's 19-fold increase in profits fails to satisfy investors. Meanwhile, NATO leaders prepare to meet in Turkey as Secretary-General Mark Rutte sounds a warning on air defence supplies. We'll be speaking to top officials throughout the day. And Bloomberg understands that a Qatari LNG ship has been stuck in the Strait of Hormuz, sending oil prices higher and testing US-Iran talks. Well, a very good morning. Here's how we start Tuesday in markets. Asia dominating again. Samsung shares dropping 10% after its results. The Kospi has been halted for 20 minutes since about 10 minutes ago after an 8% drop. And all of that dragging the broader Asian index lower. So the Kospi down, as I say, more than 8%. But the MSCI Asia Pacific Index down 1.9%. Now, the tech negative sentiment infecting Nasdaq futures as well as we look ahead to the Wall Street session. We're down more than 1% for those, and Euro Stoxx 50 futures also in the red, though of course to a lesser extent given that Europe has less tech. Now, if we look to the cross-asset picture, we've got oil climbing this morning. Brent at 72.52 the barrel, up 0.7% as these fresh attacks on vessels in the Strait of Hormuz really have underscored the risks to traffic and tested that US-Iran deal. A reminder that the de-escalation trade remains volatile. You've got Treasury yields now at 4.12 on the 2-year. We'd seen them dropping as traders priced less chance of a July Fed hike after last week's weaker than expected jobs report. And finally, going back to Asia at the right side of the screen, the yen trading at 161.78 per dollar, having dropped to its weakest level since 1986. Hedge funds now the most negative on the Japanese currency since 2007 as the appeal of the so-called carry trade is boosted. Now, let's take a look at the risk events on the agenda for today. At 7 a.m. London time, we get German industrial production figures. The latest IFO survey already having suggested that manufacturers are slightly less pessimistic about the near-term outlook, but business morale remains very weak. Then at 10:30 a.m. London time, we'll get the Bank of England's financial stability report. That may include changes to the leverage rules related to the treatment of gilts on balance sheets, so look out for that. And then, of course, the highlight in geopolitics, the NATO summit beginning, and we await President Trump's arrival in Ankara this afternoon. Plenty on the docket. Let's set you up for the day ahead. We begin with trading on the Kospi having been halted after it slipped 8%. And we can go straight to Avril Hong for an update on Asian markets for us. Avril, really dramatic moves this morning.
Yeah, I almost don't know what to tell you, Lizzie. I mean, we started the day already on the back foot, following on from Samsung's preliminary earnings, which, by the way, were a beat. And then the losses just accelerated. It was almost like it was downhill from there. Leverage ETFs, no doubt, playing that role in exacerbating the swings. But we've also seen these circuit breakers being rolled out in South Korea. Even the TAIEX, which started the day in the green, is in negative territory. That being said, you are seeing some bright spots in the region, perhaps helping to cap some of the declines you're seeing on the region's benchmark in the form of Japanese, South Korean financial stocks, as well as Chinese internet names, including Tencent and Meituan. Furthermore, let's rake through what we're seeing on the memory makers. So Samsung, 19-fold surge in profit, right? And it was almost like it was, getting this curse the same way as Nvidia did, in that it beats but it fails to impress investors. Maybe some of this was already because investors knew that following on from Micron pricing demand, that would look good. For the full picture for memory names, we'll have to wait for SK Hynix towards the end of the month. And we are seeing these really steep declines for the moment. Consider as well the market dynamics for the likes of South Korea, for example, as some of our colleagues have been highlighting this month. It's like the buy the dip impulse among South Korean retail investors has evaporated. So that's certainly not helping. And then as well, this week we have that SK Hynix US ADR. That's going to be massive when it comes online on Friday. That could also have the effect of exacerbating the concerns that overall these AI valuations are overstretched. So it looks really bad today. Lizzie.
Okay, Avril, thank you for the update. That's Avril Hong in Singapore. And over on Wall Street, the roller coaster continues as well. Nasdaq futures, as I say, pointing to a lower open after a positive day yesterday. Let's go to Bloomberg M Live strategist Mark Cranfield for more. Mark, I do have to wonder how far the fallout is going to reach from those Samsung earnings around the world, cross-asset.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a wake-up call for Wall Street because they're just starting their earnings season and they might be pretty put off by the idea that you've got a company like Samsung with such tremendous numbers on the surface and yet the stock is declining very heavily. So when you think of the big tech companies coming up in the United States, investors will probably be saying, wow, are we in for the similar kind of treatment where some of the stocks which have performed pretty well, maybe it's all priced in, and it would need something really extraordinary in the profit numbers to keep that going. So certainly that'll be a bit of a warning, and we're likely to see at least a negative start in the US. Of course, the conditions are not exactly the same. It may well be that this SK Hynix ADR is distorting the situation in Korea, which doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be so bad for the US market. People may well be allocating funds away from the Korean stocks to play in the US listings which are coming up, and they're very big. There's a large amount of money, potential for relatively quick gains there because it may be underpriced initially, and so people may well be using it as a trading opportunity. Once it's out the way, they may switch back to normal conditions and go back into the Korean market. But in the near term, certainly that ADR is a big headwind. How much that really means for Wall Street, we'll have to wait and see. But certainly, as Avril was saying, we've seen before, Nvidia can produce very good results and still the price of the shares can come down. Not always as much as we're seeing for Samsung today. A 10% decline is pretty dramatic, but certainly it's a wake-up call, and Wall Street will be on edge when it starts later today.
OK, thanks for the context. Mark Cranfield there, our Bloomberg M Live strategist. Well, in another corner of the market, we see oil prices edging higher after a tanker transiting the Strait of Hormuz was reported being hit by an unknown projectile. Bloomberg understands that an LNG carrier owned by Qatar's state-owned shipping company was hit in the early hours of this morning, while Axios has reported that 2 merchant vessels had been struck by Iranian missiles. Let's get more now from Abir Abu Omar, who joins us as Bloomberg Horizon's Middle East and Africa anchor. Abir, good morning to you. What impact is this attack going to have on the prospects for a peace deal then? We know that the talks between the US and Iran have been suspended for the funeral of the late Supreme Leader.
Good morning, Lizzie. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we're not seeing any progress in the talks this week, and that's as President Trump has given the Iranians some time for the funeral that is supposed to end by the end of this week, or the 9th is our understanding. But when it comes to this attack that we saw in the early hours of Tuesday, this is Al-Rikayat is what it's called, an LNG ship flagged to Qatar that was attacked by Iran is, again, our understanding. Now, what is the impact of this on the talks? It's still too early to tell. And Lizzie, this is not the first time we've seen such an attack happen since the arrival of that MOU in Switzerland a few weeks ago. And so this has happened before. It had led to a retaliation by the American side. President Trump had said previously when such an attack happened that he will not just sit idle, that he will have to respond to Iran. He did order the military to hit Iranian targets. But the reason this is happening in the Strait of Hormuz is because Iran had laid it out, really. It told ships and tankers, both commercial and those that are linked to sovereigns, to stick to the routes that it had laid out, to stick to the rules or the sort of order that it had laid out on the waterway. So for ships to go through the coast that is closer to Iran. And we've seen that ships that don't stick to those routes have been attacked previously. And so the real question here is whether this opens up a new paradigm of movement in the Strait of Hormuz. And we're seeing, as you have mentioned, Brent crude prices moving on this news, but the impact of what it would have on wider peace talks and the arrival of a permanent peace deal is still unclear. Our assumption is that just like the attacks that have happened 10 days or so ago, that the peace talks generally would go on. This is, again, just based on what history entails. But it's still too early to tell. We still don't have a response from the United States. And so we shall wait and see whether that happens and just what impact that will happen. This attack this morning, or these attacks this morning, will have on the movement of other ships that have already been treading with caution in the Strait of Hormuz, Lizzie.
Okay, Abir, thank you so much. That's Bloomberg Horizons Middle East and Africa anchor Abir Abu Omar. And of course, this will be a key topic at the NATO summit, and still ahead on Daybreak Europe, NATO leaders refining their pitches to US President Donald Trump. Will be live at the summit in Ankara later on. But first, Marine Le Pen's political future hangs in the balance as an appeals court prepares to rule on the French far-right leader's embezzlement case. We'll go to Paris to get you the latest next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Now, an appeals court in Paris is due to decide whether to uphold Marine Le Pen's conviction for embezzlement of EU funds. The verdict will determine whether the far-right leader can stand in next year's presidential election. And we can get more now with Bloomberg's Caroline Conan, who joins us from outside the Court of Appeal in Paris. Caroline, over to you.
This is a crucial day for the political career of Marine Le Pen when she's going to find out whether she can run for president or not. I'm very happy to be joined by Douglas Yates from the American Graduate School in Paris. Good morning, Douglas.
Good morning.
First question, of course, there are several scenarios. What are the main scenarios, and what, in your view, is the most likely outcome?
So it seems simple. Either she wins or she loses. But it's not that simple. So what does it mean to win? For her, a total victory would be that the sentence would be eradicated, particularly the exclusion from running. But there's other elements. She has 4-month prison sentence, €100,000 fine. There's a lot of other elements, but not being excluded. If she wins, then the parquet, the prosecution, has the right to appeal, which would mean while that appeal was pending, she would actually be excluded. The second is she wins by getting a reduced sentence. Like they could reduce her exclusion until right before the election, and she could wear a leg bracelet. She said on the national television she would refuse to do that because she wouldn't have the freedom to go to rallies without a judge's opinion. The second is she loses. So if she loses the appeal here, she could appeal the appeal to the Court of Cassation. But
which is France's highest court.
France's highest court. But while she was waiting, she would be excluded from the election. So even though she could eventually win, she would lose her chance to run. And finally, she loses outright. The Court of Appeal simply rejects her appeal.
So obviously she has a chance of not being able to run in these next presidential elections in April. She said this was a political trial, not a judicial trial. Is that your point of view?
Well, there are some political elements here. She is deeply unpopular with a large part of the population, and this could be seen as lawfare. But to be fair, if you look at the dossier, they had internal RN documents showing that she was aware of this détournement de fonds, of this embezzlement.
Public funds.
Yeah, taking this European money and using it for her French campaigns, ironically when she was anti-European, and they have internal documents. So in the appeal, she stopped pretending that there was no crime and rather said she wasn't aware, she's sorry. So it doesn't sound like on the base of things she can get off. She can deny the crime.
If you're looking at the day after, what comes next? Obviously, Plan B, Jordan Bardella, the president of the National Rally. Do you think he would be easier to beat than Marine Le Pen?
Well, he's much more popular with younger voters. But France is an aging country, and it's the elder voters who matter more. So I'm actually of the opinion that not only is she going to lose today, and he is going to be the candidate, but a year from now, he's going to win.
So it's not about when he's going to, it's not about whether he's going to run. It's more about when is he going to run. Is he going to run in 2027? Is he going to run in 2032? What is Marine Le Pen's role in the case of a Bardella candidacy?
Yeah, so she said even if she loses today, that's not the end of her career. So she's not accepting political death. And she went to kind of an open ceremony just this week and said openly that if she loses here today, she will support his candidacy full-fledged. We should note that there's actually family links between Bardella and the Le Pen dynasty, so they have deeper links than just a political alliance. But also, this machine, the Rassemblement National, is forecast to win, with or without her.
Who's the best placed in terms of a centrist candidate to beat either Jordan Bardella or Marine Le Pen? There seems to be a lot of candidates at the moment with no clear successor to Emmanuel Macron.
Yeah, Macron didn't succeed in creating a real party structure. So we have a plethora of former prime ministers, including the current prime minister, Sébastien Lecornu. But most of the talk, although it's early in the process, is around one of Macron's earlier prime ministers, Edouard Philippe, the mayor of Le Havre, who in the shadows has been growing.
And of course, there's also Gabriel Attal, who might emerge. Le Cornu, current prime minister, also is going to have a very busy autumn with the budget that needs to pass. We've seen what happened to Michel Barnier, François Bayrou, the former two prime ministers who didn't manage to pass a budget and were ousted on the budget plans. Are we going to see another political crisis in front even before the presidential elections?
Yeah, because much of what Parliament does has the presidential elections in mind, and there's no majority in Parliament. This is an opportunity for those smaller parties, particularly in the opposition, but also smaller parties that should be aligned to break off that alliance for perhaps good reasons, but nevertheless, underneath all of that, to prepare for their own candidacy in the first round of the presidential elections.
Douglas, always great to have you fresh and early in the morning outside the Court of Appeal in Paris for this very important day for Marine Le Pen and for the next presidential elections that's in April and May of 2027.
A really useful conversation. Caroline, thank you so much for bringing it to us. That's Caroline Conin at the Court of Appeal in Paris. Well, coming up on Daybreak Europe, a stark warning from the head of NATO over its ability to support Ukraine. We'll be live at the NATO summit next. This is Bloomberg.
They committed to invest 5% of GDP in defense by 2035. And now, just 1 year later, we already see transformational progress. Here in Ankara, I expect nations to present clear, concrete and credible plans to reach that 5% goal.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte speaking yesterday in the run-up to the alliance's annual summit, which kicks off today in Turkey. And we can get a preview now with our Bloomberg Chief Europe correspondent, Oliver Crook, who joins us from Ankara. Ollie, good morning. What's Trump's next move for NATO going to be?
Yeah, that's the big question here for European allies and all of NATO allies is what Trump is going to come to this meeting with. Again, this really sort of is the follow-on meeting from a year ago, that really historic meeting that was set in the Netherlands, in which effectively Donald Trump compelled the entire NATO alliance to commit to spend 5% of its GDP on military and defense, up from that, of course, original 2% target, which effectively very few members of NATO, particularly those in Europe, had been meeting before that point. And that was really seen as a real unmitigated success for Trump foreign policy. And obviously in the 12 months since then, there's been a lot more Trump foreign policy, and not all of it an unmitigated success. And of course, the war in Iran has been one of the main issues that has strained the NATO alliance. We've heard even from Donald Trump in the lead up to this meeting, once again sort of restating his dissatisfaction, his anger with a number of NATO allies for their lack of participation in the military actions within Iran. And of course, the issues about using air bases and all those sorts of things has really caused a lot of rifts within the NATO alliance between the bilateral bilateral relations with the United States and a number of leaders, including Giorgia Meloni, where you've got sort of fresh more fuel on that fire yesterday with Trump posting a meme about her. And those are going to be some of the conversations, some of the more tough ones coming into this meeting. I think for Rutte and a number of Europeans, this is all about not rocking the boat, creating a sort of positive narrative that the United States can buy into. So that means for the Europeans really advertising all the spending that they have done, the ways in which they are concretely going to get to that 5% target. And we're expecting, says Rutte, over the next couple of days, tens of billions of dollars of announcements of sort of military procurement contracts over the next couple of days. So that really will be the sort of focus on the European side. But of course, they're not the only participants here.
And of course, the Europeans will want Ukraine to be a key topic at this year's summit, Ollie. But it seems like President Trump's losing patience for and interest in that war. Could we see progress towards ending it?
Yeah, so there's a real sort of opportunity, I think, that President Zelensky senses in the air here. You'll remember that a couple of weeks ago, Zelensky managed to get back in the room with President Trump after a number of weeks and a number of months where there had been no face-to-face meetings between Trump and Zelensky. That was at the G7 meeting. So for Zelensky, this is really an opportunity for him to follow up on that meeting and try to get President Trump re-engaged in the conflict with the Russians and really trying to get towards that diplomatic solution. I think that for Zelensky, the pitch that he is going to make at this point, you'll remember, obviously, the catastrophic Oval Office meeting that happened about a year and a half ago in which President Trump kept reiterating to Zelensky he's got no cards. Zelensky today has a great many more cards than he did a year and a half ago. He's got that 90 billion euro loan from the Europeans. He's got very great deal of success on the battlefield in terms of halting Russian progress. And, of course, all of those deep strikes that we've been seeing within Russia, hitting near Moscow, hitting all that sort of oil infrastructure. These are the kinds of things that he's going to present to the President of the United States to really convince him that Ukraine has a shot and that it deserves the United States' support. The other side that he's going to also be looking at, and the support that he really needs from the United States, is on military hardware. We've been talking about air defense for a number of years. Zelensky has reiterated it for many, many years, but really he needs it now critically because we've been seeing over the last couple of days really put on full display these cruise missiles that the Russians are firing to Ukraine effectively are not able to be prevented in any way at all. They need those Patriot batteries. Will he get Trump to be able to send a few over to the Ukrainians? That is the big question for Zelensky.
OK, Ollie, really looking forward to all of your coverage of the summit. That's Bloomberg's Oliver Crook on the ground for us in Turkey. And we'll be back at the NATO summit throughout the day, speaking to guests, including the Swedish Prime Minister and the Finnish President as well. So don't miss any of that coverage. Now, let's turn to some other top stories that we're following for you this morning. Maine Democrat Graham Platner is under pressure from party leaders and allies to end his bid for the state's US Senate bid after a new report raised an allegation of sexual assault against him. Platner denies the claims, and Bloomberg has not independently verified the allegations, but the candidate said that he'll consider whether to continue in the race.
Any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically false, regardless of the inaccuracy of the reporting, but mindful of the political reality it will inflict. We are taking the time to reflect on the best path forward for the state that I love, the people that I love, the movement I belong to, and the goal of defeating Susan Collins. Those were the goals when we launched this campaign, and they remain my goals today.
Elsewhere, French President Emmanuel Macron is in Syria for a two-day visit, becoming the first EU leader to travel there since the fall of the Assad regime in late 2024. The Elysée says that the trip is aimed at showing France's support for the reconstruction of a sovereign and stable Syria. Well, coming up on the programme, how are UK investors positioning as the second half of the year gets underway? We're going to get the take of Anna Macdonald from Hargreaves Lansdown next, with all the political instability around number 10 Downing Street. That conversation coming up. This is Bloomberg. Live from London, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden with your top stories. When a 2,000% gain just isn't enough, tech stocks lead markets lower after Samsung's 19-fold increase in profits fails to satisfy investors. Meanwhile, NATO leaders prepare to meet in Turkey as Secretary-General Mark Rutte sounds a warning on air defence supplies. We'll be speaking to top officials throughout the day. And Bloomberg understands that a Qatari LNG ship has been stuck in the Strait of Hormuz, sending oil prices higher and testing US-Iran talks. Well, a very good morning. If you are just joining us, it's 6:30 a.m. here in London. Let's take a look at these markets. Trading back in action on the Kospi, but we've seen some dramatic moves already this morning. It was halted trading for 20 minutes after an 8% drop. Now we're down 6.7%. It's dragging the broader Asian index lower, the MSCI Asia Pacific Index down 1.7%. And it all started off, as I say, with those Samsung results. Just not good enough for investors, it seems, and those shares having dropped more than 10% earlier on in the session. Now, the tech negative sentiment infecting Nasdaq futures, as you can see as well, they're down more than 1% as things stand. And European futures pointing lower too, down 0.4% for Euro Stoxx 50 futures, less of an exposure to tech and therefore less of a hit expected. Now, flipping over to the cross-asset picture, we talked about the geopolitics with Abir Abu Omar earlier in the programme. Oil climbing off the back of those fresh attacks on tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, really underscoring the risks to traffic. A reminder to us that the de-escalation trade stays volatile. You've got 2-year Treasury yields at 4.12. Yesterday, we had seen the yield dropping on traders pricing less of a chance of a July Fed hike. That, of course, after the weaker than expected jobs data last week. And then we keep an eye constantly on the yen. 161.84 per dollar is where we trade right now. We have been at our lowest level since 1986. So hedge funds now the most negative on the Japanese currency since 2007 as the appeal of the so-called carry trade is boosted. Now, let's turn over to the front pages as well this morning, kicking off with the Financial Times, which leads with a story saying that Greek shipping companies have made close to $4 billion transporting Russian oil over the past 3 years, even as the G7 sought to curb the Kremlin's oil revenues. We can also take a look at the Wall Street Journal. It this morning focuses on the pressure on Maine Democrat Graham Platner to quit the closely watched Senate race over new allegations of sexual assault, which he denies, as we played you just a moment ago. And then here in Europe, let's look at Spain's El País. Attention on the football, no surprises there. After the country eliminated Cristiano Ronaldo's Portugal side to book their place in the World Cup quarter-finals. Well, you can get a roundup of all the stories you need to know to get your day going in today's edition of Daybreak, which as ever, terminal subscribers can find by going to DAYB Go. Now, the UK's Business Secretary said that there'll be a stable industrial strategy through the forthcoming change of leadership in Downing Street. I've been speaking exclusively to Peter Kyle, and I asked him whether Andy Burnham, the likely next Prime Minister, of course, or his team, had asked him to stay on.
I am not going to talk about any of the conversations that I have had with Andy and his team, other than to reassure people that, as I've always said, I will do anything I can to ensure a functional change of power, that people who are depending on government, and in my case, the business community and the innovators out there who are commercializing and doing extraordinary work, like the business I'm visiting here today, and those are the people who need to see the continuity. So yes, I'm engaging fully with Andy's team. I am ready to serve a Labour government, as I always am, but these are conversations that I will have with Andy and his team in private. I don't talk to him through the media. I don't expect to be talked at via the media.
I wonder, when you think about your legacy and the Starmer government's legacy, whether that strategy and the National Wealth Fund plans and the expansion of the British Business Bank are all going to survive unchanged under a Burnham premiership. Do you think they will?
Well, Andy Burnham has already committed to the industrial strategy. Why? Because Andy Burnham has benefited from it when he was mayor. He saw what the industrial strategy delivered for the people and the businesses of Manchester. I also engaged with him a great deal in that period, and he understood what it was delivering for our country. £360 billion worth of private investment has been crowded in around those industrial 8 sectors. And of course, that means all around the country, there are examples of businesses that are getting private investment into it, backed up and sometimes unlocked by very strategic use of investment from the British Business Bank as well. So we set in the industrial strategy a 10-year window of stability for industrial strategy around those 8 key sectors. And the fact that we are going through a transition of leadership of the country, one thing businesses can be absolutely certain of, it won't change the fundamentals of the industrial strategy. That is something that Germany and other countries around the world have benefited from over the years. We have learned from that stability, and that stability will be maintained.
Secretary of State, let me ask you very directly. You have a lot of contact with business leaders. That is your job. Who do they want for the next Chancellor? Do they see Ed Miliband as credible?
Well, I've not had these sorts of conversations with businesses. What businesses want is stability.
I find that hard to believe.
No, well, I'm telling you the truth. And as you know, Izzy, I never, ever give you anything other than the straight answer. Businesses are saying to me they want stability of policy making, they want stability of investment, and they want the commitments that I have made to them to be honoured. And those are the things that we are doubling down on.
The current UK Business Secretary, Peter Kyle, there, in what sounded like a bit of a job pitch to me. Well, I'm joined now by Hargreaves, Lansdown's Investment Strategy Director, Anna Macdonald, for some analysis. Anna, great to see you. 10 out of 10, by the way, on the bookcase behind you. I love that. I wonder what you made of those comments from Peter Kyle, because he sounded to me very confident that Labour's industrial strategy is going to survive a change in Prime Minister, but he wasn't so sure that business taxes wouldn't rise. Would you be concerned for UK domestically focused stocks if we did see a rise in business taxes?
Well, I think we know that there's going to be difficult choices to be made for any incoming Prime Minister. And he has said that he will stick to Labour Party manifesto commitments, which means that, again, they can't touch the personal taxes such as income tax, national insurance contributions by employees and VAT. So it does mean, again, potentially some further pressure on corporates. We've been thinking about this. We know that there are lots of hard choices to be made. There are hard choices to be made around what we do with the continued cost of benefits and the defence budget, which is going to be under significant upward pressure. We've seen the defence investment plan, but with NATO meeting today in Ankara, we know that there's a lot of pressure as well. So we could see further pressure on corporation taxes, but that will be sharply resisted by those corporates themselves.
Well, you've been writing about war bonds, which, as we know, is an idea floated by some of Andy Burnham's economic advisors. Are they a serious, investable prospect?
Well, they could be. What we've been looking at is the idea that there's really not the idea of defence spending is just not taking up enough space in the minds of us in Britain and in many other countries, not like it is in places like Sweden or Poland, those that are closer to Russia's borders. And they are seeing significant military spend and also even kind of civilian involvement in exercises on what you would do if in the case of perhaps an invasion or something like that. So it is not top of mind. And I think one of the things we think about is that a national security bond would actually bring this into public conversation about how much does need to be spent on defence. It's still just borrowing, as Starmer says, but Andy Haldane, who is one of Burnham's advisors, he's previously spoken in the past, and Simon French at Panmure Liberum has talked about perhaps making a national security bond free of inheritance tax, which could make it a pretty attractive idea for a domestic investor. And governments do want domestic investors. Their money is less mobile than the international investor.
But then, of course, you'd have less money for other stuff if you're not getting that tax revenue. So it continues the fiscal squeeze.
Yes, exactly.
How are you thinking about defence stocks at the moment? Because, we have the backdrop of the NATO summit. Is it still a momentum trade?
We aren't seeing huge buying on platform of defence stocks, but there has been in the past. And our investors, for example, are significant holders of Rolls-Royce. They're significant holders of British Aerospace and other stocks. There hasn't been significant trading around that. And actually, what we're seeing our investors doing is buying quite a lot of index funds with global exposure, still quite keen on that tech theme. There is still probably more room to grow on defence stocks, given that we know spending has to increase. But we also know that the type of defence spending is changing. We know that drones, for example, are perhaps more part of the defence investment plan than big warships.
And just finally on UK equities more broadly, of course, we've seen the takeover interest in names like EasyJet. What does that say to you? Is it a sign that UK assets are fundamentally undervalued, or is it just opportunistic M&A in a low-growth market?
I think we've seen a lot of very good companies being bought, and the M&A is running well ahead of last year. That's from overseas buyers, whether they're financial buyers or trade buyers. So ITV being bought by Sky, ITV's media and entertainment business being bought by Sky, EasyJet being bought by a private equity house. And these bids are big. There were more FTSE 100 bids, even those are both 250 stocks. We've seen more FTSE 100 bids this year, such as Intertech. It shows a market that it's English speaking. It's often internationally. It has revenues coming internationally. And we've seen that there are redemptions from the UK market, and in terms of people selling UK holdings in funds. So what that means is that shareholders often need some cash, and they're quite willing to take bids. So it's meaning that there's a good chance of deals getting done, and that you're buying some pretty good internationally focused companies at very good valuations. So I do hope that we get to keep more of these companies in the UK, and that we'll have new ones come to list. But at the moment, there's quite a lot of pressure on boards who are receiving bids, and and shareholders who are willing to take those bids, even if they're not at the valuations they might have hoped for.
Okay, the vultures continue to circle. For now, Anna, thank you so much for your analysis. That's Hargreaves Lansdown Investment Strategy Director, Anna Macdonald. Thank you. Well, coming up on Daybreak Europe, Samsung's record profit fails to impress. And we'll dig into why investors were underwhelmed next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, 6:45 a.m. here in London, where we are seeing some European stocks indicated lower, including ASML and Siltronic on TradeGate. This as a read across from what we've been seeing in the Asian session. The Kospi halted for trading earlier, given a sizable drop. It's now still down 5.5% despite being back in action, and it all comes back to these Samsung earnings. Quarterly profits having surged 19-fold in their earnings, but it still wasn't enough to impress investors. The share's now down at 7.7%, having plunged earlier as much as 10%. And as I say, that dragging tech peers lower after the big AI-fueled gains of recent months. Let's go straight to Seoul now, where you can speak to Bloomberg's Sang-mi Cha, who has an update for us. You've been diving through the details of these earnings for us, Sang-mi. Just talk us through why we have seen this reaction.
Lizzie, we have seen a $58 billion operating income for the second quarter for Samsung. This is massive when compared to the entire 4 quarters of 2025 profits. it's a beat, but it's just a 6% projection beat from the consensus. And even though the revenues also had doubled, it's just not impressing the investors enough. And we're seeing this massive decline in all the memory names, not just Samsung Electronics, but SK Hynix together, which is actually listing its ADR on Friday, and that would be one of the key catalysts to watch. Now, what happened with the Korean market is actually because it's weighed down by these memory names, Kospi has been halted, just like you said. And to put that into context, the circuit breaker, which stops the market for 20 minutes, has happened just 12 times since 2000, and 6 of those circuit breakers actually occurred all in 2026. And it's just halfway through this year. So it is getting a very volatile market that we're seeing in South Korea. So Samsung earnings, even though the real earnings, all the numbers we're going to be seeing at the end of this month, again, we'll be watching what happens with the SK Hynix ADR.
Okay, of course, that happening on Friday. And for now, Nasdaq futures down just shy of 1% as we see the effect of this rippling around the world. Sang-mi, thank you for the update. That's Bloomberg's Sang-mi Cha there. Well, staying corporate, and the chief executive of Deutsche Bank is emerging as one of the most influential forces in Berlin. Christian Saving's relationship with German politicians has positioned the bank as a key player as the country embarks on a series of reforms. For more, I'm joined by Bloomberg's German finance reporter Arno Schützer, who is with us on this story. Arno, just remind us what condition Deutsche's ties were in with the German government when Saving took over, and really how much they seem to have changed under his leadership.
Yeah, when Deutsche Bank CEO Christian Saving took over in 2018, Deutsche Bank was really the paria of financial markets, if you will. They'd gone through more than a decade of scandals and losses, costing them more than, or just below 10 billion for LIBOR rigging, RMBS, Russian mirror trades, you name it. And so Christian Saving then embarked on a cleanup mission. He really got his act together. The bank, he cut down the investment bank. He returned Deutsche Bank to profits. And once he got the grip, then he got into a position where he was able to actually give advice to Berlin. And beforehand, Angela Merkel, the former chancellor, reportedly said that she would not want to bail out Deutsche Bank. And now there was no talk of that at all anymore. He was coming from a position of strength and helping the government, for example, in the COVID crisis. Deutsche Bank's Saving was there to help design the billions that went to the German economy. And then when the Ukraine invasion by Russia took place, Saving was there again to help design sanctions. And he's been around advising on all sorts of matters from advancing the economy, on tax, on labor reform, and energy security. And so it's completely changed to a decade ago.
Yeah, so he's put the hard yards in. He's a trusted figure now. What opportunities would that yield for Deutsche Bank to capitalise on then?
Yeah, Deutsche Bank is now probably a bit more German than it used to be. And so basically, if the German economy is doing well, Deutsche Bank is doing well too. And so it is definitely in the self-interest of Christian Saving that, Germany is doing well. And now Germany has embarked on a slew of reforms. So they've pension reform just now in coming to Parliament. Last year, they decided on a €1 trillion package for infrastructure and defense spending, and there's more to come. And so it's more Deutsche Bank benefiting from Germany doing well as a whole than from particular interests for the banking system or just Deutsche Bank itself.
Arno Schutzer, thank you so much for bringing us that story. That's Bloomberg's German finance reporter there for you. Now, to some other top stories that we're following this morning. Bloomberg has learned that 2 Millennium management teams focused on trading index changes made about $3.7 billion between them in June, accounting for more than half of the hedge fund's roughly $6.6 billion pre-fee profit last month. And elsewhere, FIFA World Cup co-hosts the USA are out of the tournament after a 4-1 defeat to Belgium in Seattle. The match was overshadowed by President Trump's controversial intervention, requesting a review of the red card given to star US striker Folarin Balogun, who in the previous game that it would have seen him suspended for the Belgium clash. But that was overturned despite Belgium appealing the decision, which they called astonishing. Well, plenty more coming up on Daybreak Europe. We'll frame your day ahead with some terminal charts. So don't go anywhere. This is Bloomberg.
There is going to be a time, we don't know when it's going to happen yet, where the CapEx cycle will exhaust itself. And we will have, we've talked about this, that there is going to be malinvestment here. We don't think that spending cycle is over because they just started raising the capital in the credit market. So they're going to spend the capital, okay? So, but we can have these mini cycles in the structural bull market.
Morgan Stanley's Mike Wilson there. But for now, hundreds of billions of dollars of CapEx is still being deployed by those hyperscalers. And that is creating this divergence between the hyperscalers and the rest of the tech rally. A bit of a lag here as investors question when we're going to see those returns, how fast and will they be big enough? Now, flip the board over because this prove it moment in AI has created a lot of dispersion. The white line, as you can see on this chart, the blue line showing the relative volatility at the moment, which creates the perfect opportunity if you are a stock picker. This is the environment to be picky about what you are investing in. But turn over one more time, and of course the NATO summit is the backdrop for the week in geopolitics, and we are keeping a close eye on the defence trade. You've got the European defence trade in blue, the US defence trade here in white. And as you can see, European defence stocks over a year and more have been outperforming their US counterparts as an investment, even if Europe doesn't spend more on defence overall. So we can thank partly that pressure for burden sharing from NATO. Europe still owning the defence trade. They'll be discussing this on the opening trade up next as they go towards the cash session. This is Bloomberg.